federal and state affairs. While we're doing this, I'm going to ask my IT person to kind of go through the list on who's on Zoom, so Connie can put it in the minutes.
We have Debbie Beavers, Eric Smith, John Epley, Jordan Milhallahan, Matt Sterling, and Michelle Segan.
Thank you. I did get a text from Representative Smith. He's on his way, but I'm glad to see he's on by Zoom. First thing up, bill introductions from committee members. Seeing no bill introductions by committee members, bill introductions from the audience. Again, seeing no one from the audience coming forward, I will close bill introductions. Committee, we're going to, you can either pull it up or bring it, if you have it in your file, pull up House Bill 2137. And while you're doing that, Matt, you're on. If you'd give us the overview.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, committee. House Bill 2137 would expand the categories of alcoholic liquor licensees who can sell cereal malt beverage. Under previously enacted legislation, as of April 1st of 2019, retail liquor stores licensed under the Liquor Control Act can sell cereal malt beverage. This change in the law coincided with a policy change to allow CMB licensees to sell beer with an alcohol content of not more than 6% alcohol by volume. House Bill 2137 would extend that policy of allowing licensees to sell cereal malt beverage to liquor by the drink licensees. So under current law, clubs, restaurants, bars, caterers, and public venues can obtain a license to sell alcoholic liquor by the drink for consumption on their licensed premises under the Club and Drinking Establishment Act. The bill would amend several statutes under the Act to allow those licensees to also sell CMB. Sales of CMB would be subject to the same limitations and restrictions as sales of alcoholic liquor. Additionally, the bill would amend statutes governing the issuance of temporary permits. So temporary permits allow a permit holder to sell alcoholic liquor at a specific location for a short duration of time. It's usually only a few days. The bill would allow permit holders to also sell cereal malt beverage along with alcoholic liquor under those same restrictions and limitations that apply to the sales of alcoholic liquor. And lastly, in 2017, a law was enacted to allow the consumption of alcoholic liquor in common consumption areas that were established by a municipality. The bill would allow the consumption of CMB in those common consumption areas as well. And I'd be happy to try to answer questions the committee might have.
Thank you. Questions for the reviser? Seeing no questions for the reviser, we have three proponents that are appearing here today. The first up would be R.E. Tuck Duncan, Kansas Wine and Spirits Wholesalers Association. I think this is the first time you've been up this year, but good to see you. Please.
Although it being not on is not really a problem for me. I am Tuck Duncan. I represent the Kansas Wine and Spirits Wholesalers Association. I'm attorney practices law here in Topeka. For some of the new members of the legislature, I do a lot of beverage, alcohol, liquor licensing and work in this area. And it is a pleasure to appear before this committee. This bill, like a number of bills this year, is sort of a retread from 2020 that fell off the ledge when you folks had to shut down the legislature in March. There were a number of bills in both the House and the Senate, and both of the bills here this morning are bills in that category, which actually had been worked by one or the other body and passed out and got to the other chamber, but just never got final action. And I anticipate you'll hear some other bills, and we'll be back for those, such as there's a bill circulating for growlers. that this committee approved last year, Senate Bill 221. It ended up on the calendar but didn't get acted on. And then there's this bill, which I call the natural progression of the implementation of the uncork law. For some of you who are not aware, 4 or 5 years ago, the state of Kansas changed its policy and allowed cereal malt beverage used to be the malt beverages less than 3.2% by weight. Now we define cereal malt beverages as malt beverages not to exceed 6% by volume. And there's all sorts of chemical reasons for it, or for their definitions. But nonetheless, what this effectively did is it allowed about 98% of all beers to be sold in convenience stores and grocery stores. And when that happened, the liquor stores were given the privilege also of selling cereal malt beverages, where previously they were only allowed to sell wine, beer, and spirits. They were also given the privilege of selling 20% other items besides wine, beer, and spirits in order to sort of level the playing field. Since this convenience in the grocery stores, et cetera, we're going to get a potentially larger share of the beer market. So what's this bill do? Liquor stores in Kansas are mini wholesalers. All wines and spirits that are sold in on-premise establishments are purchased from the retail liquor store. And on some other day, when you want an ABC 101, I can give you the historical reasons for why that is relative to those. The chairman probably remembers the liquor pool, but there's a whole sorts of historical reasons. But nonetheless, so you buy your wine and your spirits if you're an Applebee's from your local liquor store. To do that, a liquor store has to also get a federal wholesaler's basic permit from the Trade and Tax Bureau of the Department of Treasury. What this bill will do is say, okay, those liquor stores that have a wholesaler's basic permit may not only sell just wine, beer, and spirits to on-premise establishments, they may now also sell the cereal malt beverages that they have in their inventory to the on-premise establishments. That's the first thing. Second thing is, this bill also covers, there's actually 2 acts that are in this bill. One act is the Liquor Control Act, which governs the licensing of the retailers, the manufacturers, et cetera. And then there's the Club and Drinking Establishment Act, which takes care of the on-premise establishments as well as the public venues and the temporary permits in the Class A and B clubs. So in the Club and Drinking Establishment Act, this bill does several things. It says if you get a temporary permit, in addition to be able to sell wine, beers, and spirits, you may now also sell cereal malt beverage. And in addition to that, since temporary permit holders are allowed to do sampling, you're allowed to sample the cereal malt beverage as well. Third thing it does is it allows drinking establishments, public venues, Class A and B clubs, who currently have the right to go to the city and get a cereal malt beverage license, to no longer have to get a cereal malt beverage license because we're going to extend the privilege of their state-issued liquor license to also sell cereal malt beverage. So one license will cover the entire category of products. And finally, as the reviser Matt stated, it also allows for the consumption of the cereal malt beverage in the common consumption areas, the first one of which was, I believe, up in Leawood by their city hall. There's one in Fort Scott, and some other cities have it, and cities are allowed to implement those by their own ordinance. And so in addition to wine, beer, and spirits, or alcoholic liquor, you can also consume cereal malt beverages. And so basically this is acknowledging that this category of CMB, which is sold everywhere, is now going to be under the umbrella of the respective licenses of those locations where it's located. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I'm pleased to answer any questions that you might have. You probably wonder, well, why does a wine and spirits wholesaler guy care? A lot of my people also sell beer or cereal malt beverage not to exceed 6% by volume. The Heinekens and Corona and a lot of the imports, et cetera. So we do have a dog in this fight as well.
Thank you, and I'm going to have the committee ask you questions as we go through. We have some time here today. So committee, if you have questions for Mr. Duncan, please. This is your opportunity. Seeing no questions, Tuck?
Gotten off so easy, and I'll wipe my spit off here so that Amy doesn't have to, worry about the old guy's germs.
I appreciate that. As you mentioned, this bill was vetted last year.
Right.
And so this is just a retread.
That's correct, but I thought it probably needed some explanation because you have some new members, Mr. Chairman.
I agree.
We welcome them aboard.
Yes, we have. And thank you for coming here today.
Thank you.
And I'll release you, and we'll take up Amy Campbell with the Kansas Association of Beverage Retailers. Amy, welcome to Federal and State Affairs.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name is Amy Campbell. I work for the Kansas Association of Beverage Retailers. This is the statewide association representing the Kansas-owned retail liquor stores. The association has been in existence since the repeal of prohibition in our state. The bill that's in front of you is relatively simple. We hope it is the last time we offer a technical cleanup for the 2019 beer law. We became aware of the issue about a year ago when local taverns, some family-owned restaurants were coming to our liquor stores that have a federal wholesale permit and asking to purchase small quantities of zero malt beverage products. The statute does not specifically permit our liquor stores to make those sales, and this bill will clean that up. So to be clear, retail liquor stores serve as an additional tier of the liquor industry in selling beer, wine, and spirits to club and drinking establishments. This bill will allow them to sell CMB to CMB on-premise establishments. I would add that our liquor stores have really kind of had an up and down roller coaster ride since April of 2019. A significant percentage of beer sales were shifted to the grocery and convenience stores after that bill went into effect. And then, as the coronavirus came along, liquor stores saw something of a boost in sales related to the fact that consumers were no longer able to get their beverages at club and drinking establishments. We assume that that boost is temporary, and of course, really want to see our on-premise partners become healthy again. With that, Mr. Chairman, I would be happy to stand for questions. I would add that we are down 35 liquor stores in the state since 2017. And we're glad that this last year has slowed down the number of stores that are closing, but we do expect to see that trend continue. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Questions? Yes. Reese?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Amy, you said that the liquor store locations are down, 17 locations?
35.
35 locations, and that's because the attributed to licensing, to accessibility for the people?
We believe that it has been a disruption to business to have a significant portion of beer sales in the state of Kansas shifted to the grocery and convenience stores. So you may have seen that your local liquor store is trying to push wine and spirit sales, trying to look a little different. Some of them have added additional products to their floor. But we all knew before this compromise was struck that certain stores would be unable to adjust to the new environment. For instance, those who were renting their space from Sam's Club or Costco. There's nothing that they could do when those lease agreements were ended. So we have seen a reduction in stores. Some of them are due to older folks who maybe were ready to retire and just decided they didn't want to go with the change. There are still stores out there that are struggling. I talk to them every week. But as I said, this last year has provided some relief in the sense that more sales are streaming through the stores as people cannot do their usual drinking at the local bar or restaurant.
Thank you. Further questions? Seeing none? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Next up is Jason Watkins, Kansas Beer Wholesalers Association. morning and welcome to Federal and State Affairs.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman. Jason Watkins, Executive Director of the Kansas Beer Wholesalers Association. It's the Kansas Beer Wholesalers that actually introduced this bill and bring it to you this morning. As usual, Mr. Duncan left nothing to be said. So, the revisor did a great job explaining the bill. Tuck did cover it quite well, as did Amy. So I won't repeat what they said. I will tell you, we think this is an important bill, and I'll share a different aspect of this with you. Maybe despite something that was said earlier, we did not change the definition of CMB in the state of Kansas. We simply allowed CMB retailers to sell beer up to 6-point ABV, okay? Oklahoma actually got rid of the CMB definition in their law, and it took them about a year and a half to get everybody licensed. We didn't want to go through that in Kansas, so instead of striking CMB from the statute and requiring a whole new set of licenses, we just said if you're a CMB retailer, which is basically a 3-2 bar or a grocery store or convenience store, you get to sell beer up to 6-point ABV. Because of that, we didn't go in and really change anything else in that section of law. And bars and restaurants, which you'll often hear referred to as on-premise accounts, have historically not been able to sell CMB. Okay, CMB was for this other group over here. You get to sell the higher alcohol content stuff. But when we made that change, I don't think anybody really thought about CMB because in our mind, CMB was going away in the marketplace, but not in the legal definition. The problem is the low alcohol content beers, which are also very often low calorie content beers, fall under the Kansas definition of CMB. So you want a low alcohol content, low calorie beer, and you go to Old Chicago and you say, I'll have a Mick Ultra Gold, right? It's about as healthy as it gets for a beer. If they sell you one, they're breaking the law. This is real simple. This fixes that. And we think that's a good thing. You're going to continue to see more and more low calorie, low alcohol content beers be sought by Kansas consumers, and this will allow bars and restaurants to be able to sell those. And as Ms. Campbell mentioned, it also does allow for her folks with a federal wholesale permit to sell those products to those people with a CMB permit. So it's really a technical cleanup. I think last year, Mr. Chairman, you even proposed putting it on the consent agenda. We pulled it off because we wanted to work one little amendment in. That amendment is in here. This bill before you today is exactly as you passed it out last year, except with some date changes. So with that, we'd urge passage of this bill, and I'm happy to stand for questions at the appropriate time.
Thank you. Questions for Mr. Watkins? Again, thank you for coming here today.
Yeah, thanks for having us, Mr. Chairman.
That's all I have as proponents appearing. I do see we have a written proponent from Scott Seidner. I thought Scott was here earlier. I didn't know if he had any comments or not. I don't think he's here now, but please look at his testimony. We have no opponents on the bill. We do have one written neutral, and that's from Debbie Beavers, Director of Alcoholic Beverage Control Division. She's on the web if anybody would have any questions of the director. Seeing no questions for the director, I want to thank her for being here. Just want one other thing, the IT person. Who do we have member-wise on the, or Connie, on the WebEx? Is here now. And Representative Smith? Okay, he's no longer on. Thank you. He's probably in the garage parking, but I don't know He probably worked a night shift last night. But with that, I will close the hearing on House Bill 2137. We're not going to do House Bill 2138. We have no proponents. Last year, when we heard this bill, we had a number of proponents. One of them, if I recall correctly, was a organization called Dirty Girls. But since we have no proponents, I'm not going to hear this bill. Yes, Representative Miller.
Were they aware of the hearing? Because
It's been published.
it's a local business.
Well, yeah, I will pass it
But
today.
it would be not surprising if they didn't notice that it was scheduled unless someone contacted them.
That's not my obligation.
No, I'm not saying it is.
But I will pass it if you make contact with the Dirty Girls.
Well, I'd be happy to, thank you.
And if they request a hearing and have proponent testimony, I will definitely try to set a hearing, because I thought it was a good bill last year. The bill had to do with spouses of law enforcement officers. They could not have a liquor license. And that's old Kansas law to keep the sheriffs and the police officers from having liquor licenses. But since we have no proponents, we're not going to hear it today. As to House Bill 2137, Representative Reese?
Mr. Chairman, if I may, I would like an emergency be declared and HB 2137 be brought up on today's calendar to be worked.
Thank you. Committee, do I have a second for that? Second from my Vice Chair. I'm going to walk this through for the new members. By our rules, we must wait 24 hours to work a bill after we've heard it. Since this seems to be of a non-controversial nature, the ranking member has made a motion to suspend the rule and work the bill today. It takes 2/3 of the committee to do that. I normally try to do it on a voice vote, but if division is called for, of course, we will take the hands. The reason I asked about the WebEx, I didn't know if Representative Smith was in the building, because he can only vote in committee if he is in the building. But he's now off WebEx. So you have heard the motion to suspend the rule and work the bill immediately. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Those opposed, nay. Opinion of the chair, the ayes have it. The rule is suspended. As to House Bill 2137, what is the pleasure of the committee? Yes, Representative Reese.
Mr. Chairman, I move that HB 2137 be approved and moved to main floor.
Thank you. I have a second. I have a second from Representative Penn. Discussion.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm just curious, I know it was mentioned last year to put it on the consent calendar. Is that something that the committee might be interested in?
Well, I've been advised by the majority leader. Normally, a consent calendar takes 3 days, and if no one objects to it, it then goes to final action. Because we're only going on the floor 1 day a week because of the pandemic, it will take 3 weeks to get this approved by the consent calendar. So they've asked us not to put anything on the consent calendar because we don't know if we'll be here in 3 weeks. I appreciate the recommendation, and normally it is a non-controversial issue. Consent calendar would have been appropriate, but since we're only going on the floor, and you can only count the days when we're on the floor. So I have a motion to pass 2137 out favorably. I have a second. Further discussion. Seeing none, all in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, nay. Opinion of the chair, the ayes have it. Ayes do have it. Matt, if you'll do the committee report.
Absolutely, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. We've got a couple of other things for the rest of the week. I'm going to pass 2138 until Representative Miller makes contact with last year's opponents, the Dirty Girls. And And it doesn't mean, just to clarify for the new members, this was a group of women that do canoe trips down some river. Representative Miller, you probably know better.
Oh, is that all it is?
But they were allowed, it would allow the lady that's in charge of it, whose husband's a police officer.
This bill actually passed the House. I added it to another bill on the floor of the Senate, so it passed both chambers and just got lost when we had abruptly quit. But I'll try to, I assume they're still in business, and if they are, I'll contact them and tell them, I'll find out why they weren't here at least.
Thank you for that. We're meeting tomorrow. I will get the agenda out by noon today. On next week, we picked up a few more bills. So look for the agenda this afternoon at some point in time, right, County? Bill introductions from committee. Seeing none. Bill introductions from the audience. Again, seeing none. Bill introductions is closed. We are adjourned until tomorrow. Thank you, folks.